Alright, so moving further, our next speaker is someone who knows the cloud like the back of his hand, Dhaval Pancholi sir. Dhaval Pancholi sir is lead DevOps engineer at Cactus Communications with over 5 years of experience in DevOps and close to 20 years in total IT experience. He will give us an invaluable session on introduction to AWS DevOps because DevOps and AWS जहाँ मिलते हैं वहाँ efficiency अपने आप आ जाती है.
हाय हाय चलो तो लाइक जैसे क्लाउड फिल्ड विथ नॉलेज एंड इंफॉर्मेशन धवन सर इज ऑल्सो फिल्ड विथ नॉलेज एंड इंफॉर्मेशन सो सर हमें बारिश कर दीजिए आप नॉलेज की हम पे सॉरी फॉर बैड
Check, check. Okay, good evening all. I hope everyone is still awake. This is a very amazing place to be, right? Very less light, you can easily hide, sleep. I mean, I would love to be. So I'll try to keep you awake if it helps. So my introduction is already done. This is a little bit about me, like already been told. Just a few new things which is there, which was not in the, which was not part of the intro. I'm an avid coffee lover, and if I have to define myself in just one word, I'm a troubleshooter. Okay, so this is a quick agenda we have today. I often come into this kind of challenging situation where I am probably the last man standing between, you know, the session could be boring, challenging, or the fun part, which will happen after this session. So kindly bear. Okay, so what I am doing today is I am trying to shed some light on AWS related to DevOps services. Okay, so we'll start with what is AWS, and then we'll see what all different offerings AWS has for DevOps. Okay, so how many of you have seen this kind of screen before, or this kind of diagram? Okay, okay, wonderful. My job is very easy. So you understand that this is what normally defined as a DevOps. Okay. Now anybody asks you like, or anybody asks me what is DevOps, there's no standard definition of it. It's what you perceive of. Okay. How you learn about it, how you have gone through it. So mainly the two major components, which is development and operations, and the collaboration or the approach, which helps you, you know, deploy and automate and put your solution to production faster. That is what whole DevOps is about. Okay, in a very simple nutshell. And all these different components or different stages are involved. Like you start with plan, then you code for your solution, then you build it, you add testing to it, and then you release it, deploy it, monitor it. That's the whole circle, and this loop keep on getting repeated. Okay. People talk about agile, people talk about fail fast. This is one of the method, one of the approach which has been proven over the period of time, and people use it. Now this is a general DevOps we are talking about. Now we just try to talk about DevOps on AWS or in general also, that why DevOps is important, why we want to use DevOps. Okay. So this is some of the benefits, some of the important key points that you can have, you can achieve speed. When we talk of speed, it is like from the idea to production, from the coding to deployment. You can have speed thanks to automation, thanks to DevOps tooling, all the processes and different approaches are being followed. You can have rapid delivery, whatever you are thinking, whatever you want to deliver to your customers, your clients, you can deliver it at a rapid pace. Have a reliability. When you have a system in place, when you have a process in place, okay, you can rely on it because you have various monitoring in place, various checks in place, and keep on repeating the same process. Then comes the scale. Scale is very important nowadays because when you start your solution, when you start your application, when you start your product, you're not aware whether it will be a success, whether it will be not, right? So scale comes in the picture. And of course, the improved collaboration. Nowadays, people do not work in silos. Back in the time, like developer was doing his thing, the ops guy was doing his thing. Nowadays, people collaborate often, talk to each other, understand, speak the same language. And of course, we just have had a wonderful session on security. Security is also part of like everyone's job, not only DevOps or a developer. Talking about the the whole landscape we have on DevOps on AWS, okay? Starting with something called continuous integration and continuous delivery, that is CI/CD. And we have these key services available from AWS, that is AWS Code Pipeline, AWS Code Build, and AWS Code Deploy. What does these services normally do, right? So your AWS Code Pipeline is a systematic or a step-by-step process through which you can give specific instruction on how your code should be tested, how your code should be built, how your code should be like from the version control, it should go to various stages. Okay. Same goes for AWS Code Build. You build your code, right? Whatever code you have written, you have to build it, make some executable out of it. Could be a Java code, could be a Node code, or any other code. And after that, you deploy it so your customers, your clients can use it, right? So these three services are part of the CI/CD suite AWS has to offer, and these services often work in like in conjunction with each and other. So you have a pipeline written where you are mentioning that this is where my code is in a specific version control. It could be like, I have not mentioned that service. There is another service called AWS Code Commit, which is kind of deprecated now. But AWS Code Commit is a version control system, just like GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket. So you have your code in any version control. From that version control, you get your code into a particular build step. That okay, this is how my code will be built. Whether it will be built on a container, like creating a Docker image, or creating an executable and then running it on a server like EC2 instance. Okay. Then you build it, and after that you deploy it. When you create a pipeline, in pipeline you mention that these many steps should happen. In between, my code should be tested. If like being a developer, you might be aware that people write unit test cases and other sort of testing, code quality analysis and other steps happen. All those things are part of your pipeline. Moving forward, another important aspect of today's DevOps is microservices, microservice-based architecture. People want to use it, that like instead of having a big service or a big solution, make small part of it easy to manage, easy to handle, deploy. Okay, so if one part of your solution or one part of your system is not working, then the whole product will not go down or a whole service will not go down. So for microservices and for support for containers, AWS has got a service called AWS Elastic Container Service. That way you can create different task definitions, you can deploy your Docker images and other container images on AWS platform, and you can also have the images in AWS Elastic Container Registry. That way you can deploy your services in containers, run it, have interconnectability of the services, and one more service which is a kind of in a serverless domain, which might have already been talked about, that is AWS Lambda. So any backend service or any container-based service also can be run through Lambda, where you don't have to define your infrastructure or the load, and in a very easy way, based on a function, you can define your service and run it. Moving forward, in today's day, your infrastructure also defined as a code. So in infrastructure as a code, there are a couple of services available from AWS. One popular service is AWS CloudFormation. That is how you define your infrastructure in a form of a code, mainly JSON based format. That you define that, okay, this is how my stack should look like. It could be creating the networking layer, like different VPCs, subnets, and various routes for it. Or you want to create a kind of a cluster for running different Docker images of ECS. So depending on your requirement, you can create a JSON. Using infrastructure as a code is that you can reuse all your code and create same sort of infrastructure again and again repeatedly. You can also incorporate AWS CloudFormation and related code into pipelines and have a step-by-step process for setting up your infrastructure, which is you could be creating repeatedly. Another service is that is mainly for the configuration management service for like Chef. Chef is a popular configuration management tool. When you are running multiple servers, like a fleet of servers, and you want to set up configuration management, Chef could be used. So the AWS OpsWorks for Chef is the service which comes under infrastructure management part. And a couple of services which is here mentioned is that AWS System Manager and AWS Config. So AWS System Manager again is a management service which does multiple jobs. One of the favorite jobs it does is a session manager. So like if I have to connect to my servers or my like resources, I do not need to have the SSH keys and the terminals and everything configured. I could just use the browser, connect to a session, and use the resources without being dependent on my local machine or to set up sensitive information on my local machine. So that is one of the feature which I use often and I really like about AWS System Manager. Also, it has a multiple things. Another important thing which I really use and in many of our applications we use is a parameter store. It's like a environment variable sort of thing, key value pair you can set up, and the same parameters you can use at runtime so that you don't have to have your secrets or you don't have to have sensitive information stored into your code or like against, which is against best practices as we learned in the previous session. AWS config is another important service which is kind of, you can say, like policy as a code. So you can have various policies in place. For example, a quick example could be that you have S3 bucket and a lot of data is stored in S3 bucket. A lot of time we do not keep our S3 bucket and the data encrypted. We understood the importance of encryption again in the security session. So if your bucket is unencrypted, if you have like 100 buckets, you might be missing on 1 or 2 buckets. If you have the config enabled, and config will give you an idea that okay, 2 of your buckets have data unencrypted. If you are storing your database, you are storing snapshots of your database, backupping your database, again, if that is not encrypted, you get an alert. Also, not only you get an alert, you also can automate that alert or remediate it with the options available. So if you want to set up, if you want to enforce an encryption on an unencrypted bucket or a particular database snapshot, you could use the key, KMS key or your own use key, and using config, you can remediate that particular thing. Moving forward, again we saw the monitoring and logging part in the previous session. Okay, so CloudWatch and AWS X-Ray, these are the services. So basically X-Ray is like a little bit of advanced monitoring, you can say. It gives you, like when you are having microservices, multiple services running, and communicating with each other. If there is any challenges happening somewhere, one particular service or one particular call to a service is taking longer time, and the performance management and other stuff you want to monitor and check, X-ray could help through distributed tracing. So if you have a transaction happening from one service to another and to the another, so which service, which part is taking longer time, if there is any challenge, if there is any error happening, you could use AWS X-ray. AWS CloudWatch, you already might have seen in previous sessions that it's mainly used for monitoring and alerting through alarms. Also, AWS CloudTrail, as we have already seen, one very important service people often do not pay a lot of attention to. Whenever you create a new account, just make sure you enable CloudTrail if you want to save on your money and you want to secure your account. Okay. This is a kind of a not very widely used service, but like AWS, like Amazon DevOps Guru. So what Amazon DevOps Guru does, in previous sessions we have seen various services like Security Hub, Guard Duty, and so on and so forth. And in here also we are seeing various services like X-ray. So all these services collect the data, and Amazon DevOps Guru gives you a kind of a consolidated dashboard of what are the different problems you have, what are the different errors, challenges you have in your system, and how you can remediate to it. It also has a feature for alarms and alerting, so you get notified of anything wrong happening in your application. The last, you might have already seen this platform as a service in our earlier session. So AWS Elastic Beanstalk is one service where you don't have to worry about like deploying your infrastructure. Like you focus on your development. If you're a developer, you create your, like you write your code, you create an executable of it. Like if it is Java or anything, you deploy it like a jar file or a war file. In the background, it uses ECS like AWS Elastic Container Service and deploys your code on it. It has all the features. You can enable load balancing for your workload if you want to manage your incoming requests and everything. So with a very limited knowledge of infrastructure, you can still deploy your code and run a full-fledged application. So that way, and it supports variety of languages. So this is a wonderful service to use. When you have limited knowledge, you are a developer, you focus on your development, you focus on your code, and then rest of the things Elastic Beanstalk will handle. So that's platform as a service. Last, I want to talk about this wonderful program AWS runs. It's called AWS Educate. So AWS Educate, if you go on this link or maybe you just Google it. So AWS Educate is very simple way to get started with your journey on AWS. We are on a beginner's track. A lot of people could be experienced professionals starting their cloud journey, or could be students who are finishing up their studies and starting it. Okay, so AWS Educate will really help you. It's a free resource. You can go there, register, and get started with various services like EC2, S3, RDS, database, and all other different things. So this is a wonderful thing to take advantage of it. And that is all from my side. Thank you. So again, like we are in a beginner's track, so this is just a beginning for all of you, whosoever is taking journey on the cloud path. And feel free to connect, feel free to communicate, network as and when possible. Thank you so much once again.
I would like to thank Dhaval Pancholi sir for explaining us the depths of DevOps and AWS services. And I would like to ask Om Shri ma'am to felicitate sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.